welcome to UserAndI, the channel where I explore all things UX and UI design, and this week's video is going to be exploring different navigation styles that you can use in your next design, whether you're designing a landing page, or it's a sign up page, or it's a whole scale SaaS application. These navigation styles are ones that you can use for inspiration or you can use in your next mockup. So let's get started. First things first, I'm going to just put in a dummy logo here. And I'm going to give that I'm going to make that a group. Then I'm going to make that an auto layout. Let's give it some padding, top and bottom. And let's give some padding on either side. Then we're going to give that a fill of a light grey, just so we can see where it is. And then what I'm going to do next is give it a bit more padding on either side, left and right. Then I'm going to drop the padding on the top and bottom. Perfect. And then I'm going to go with our buttons. They're just going to be text labels for now, because we're just exploring navigation styles. It's not really about call to action styles. Now I'm going to duplicate that a few times. I'm going to put that in a group. Auto layout, change that to horizontal, and I'm going to make that 20 on each side. I'm going to make the gap 20 between them, sorry. Then I'm going to create another auto layout. And I'm going to change. So on the new auto layout settings, the spacing mode has changed to being under this drop down menu here. So I'm going to change that space between, and then I'm just going to stretch this out and center align it. So here's our first navigation style, and it's pretty straightforward. You've got your logo on the far left and you've got your buttons on the far right. Now this is pretty much a typical layout. You would have seen it before, or you would have used it before, and it's a layout that I use often. I'm a big fan of it, and I tend to find if you've got no sort of primary actions or actions that stand out in your menu, this is the one you want to go for. So I'm going to rename it up here as style 1. Whoops. And we're going to go in and create our second one. But what we're going to do, I'm going to make this whole box an auto layout group. And I'm going to put some space in between them. I'm also going to draw a dividing line so we know exactly where the separation is. I'm going to make that fill. Then I'm going to turn down the transparency just a tad. Well, quite a bit. Doesn't need to be that strong. Just so you can see what we're working with. And I'll change the spacing on there for the fun of it. That's the wrong one. Here's what I actually want. I actually want this. There we go. Cool. Right, so navigation style number 2. What I'm going to do is, this is just going to be a quick amend actually. I'm going to, using Command Shift and G if you're on a Mac and Control Shift and G if you're on a PC, I'm going to remove my group. I'm going to pop our logo in the middle, and I'm going to make this is an auto layout group already. I'm going to change the spacing to packed, and then I'm going to change the alignment to center, and I'm also going to take down the spacing. Now here's our next navigation style. Now I quite like this because it's quite central. It's very visually pleasing from what I've seen when it's been used. One thing to note here, that depending on what your navigation buttons are, it won't look entirely central. So that's one thing to remember when using this style. Depending on the kind of logo style you've got, this can work really well. So I'm going to duplicate our line. Let's go on to navigation style number 3. I'm going to take this first one, and what we're going to do is duplicate our logo. I'm going to put it on the other side, and I'm going to change it to CTA, and I'm going to put another call to action in there, and I'm going to group those. I'm going to make that an auto layout as well, and I'm going to take that down to 15. But what I'm also going to do is, using Shift and X on PC or Mac, I'm also gonna invert the colors. So the background color now becomes the border, and the border now becomes the background color. And what I've also done is swapped the order. So your main primary call to action would be here, and your secondary would be here. And then you've got your buttons in the middle. So again, this doesn't look quite central, but it really does depend on the kind of layout you've got. If you were coding this, what you could do is on the left hand side, if you click here, these are where the independent paddings come in. So what you could do to make this more central, again, depending on the length of the buttons you've got here, what you could do is add some padding to the left hand side, and what that does is that it makes it very, very central. So I tend to find this layout works really well if you've got, let's say, a SaaS product, or I don't know, maybe it's something that it has a primary action, whereas in the top two there's no primary action. They can be about, gallery, contact us, and things like that. This would work well if you've got maybe about, gallery, contact us, but you also have sign up or login just here. So those where your primary actions would be. Well, you could sort of segregate your main call to actions to drive the user's eyes to this area. I quite like that. There's one more we can go for actually, well, two more. Again, I'll duplicate that. And, oh sorry, missed a line. What we could do here, and this is something I like doing myself, I'm going to take the padding out of this side here, and I'm actually going to group these two. And what I'm also going to do then is pop it in the auto layout, but just take down the padding. So now what we've got is that we don't have to worry about the alignment here. What we now have is all our buttons aligned to the right, and we still have our call to actions here, which makes a lot of sense. It's a slight amendment on the one above, but it works really well if the alignment kind of throws you a little bit. And if you even wanted to, what you could do here is add a dividing line, take down the transparency of that just to show that there's a clear division between what kind of buttons there are. And if we take that down just a tiny bit, maybe like to 15, we can see that's a lot more organized than what we had before. It just adds a tiny element of, okay, there's a division there, and these buttons are starkly different to the other buttons. I'm just going to make the height on this a little smaller. Perfect, that's what we're looking for. And for our last navigation style, what I'm going to do again is duplicate this line, and I'm going to take this one. And I'm going to pull this out. Actually, let's leave that in, but let's put it by the side. Let's make these a group. I'll make that an auto layout as well. And then on the main auto layout, I'm going to change the alignment to vertical. And then I'll also take down the size of our logo, and then I'm going to pop down this spacing. Now this is a very simple one, and again, much like all the other ones, well, much like this one, it's pretty central. And I find that this really works if you've got not a few navigation buttons, but you really want your logo to stand out. It works really well. So I've got no favorites here, but in your next design, if you ever have a navigation style that you want to use, feel free to look back at this video and experiment. Find what works for you, maybe adding a dividing line, maybe change the ordering. The world is endless when it comes to this. And to show you a real life example of a navigation style that I've used, here's my confidence building SaaS application, right? I've got my logo proudly on the far left, and then I've got my navigation on the right. I have my normal call to actions, and then I have my secondary call to action here. I have my main call to action down here, but immediately as a user, because this is disabled, what you can immediately see is the logo and then the navigation, and this stands out. Everything looks really balanced. So feel free to use one of these navigation styles in your next video, and leave me a comment. Let me know how you get on. Let me know which one's your favorite. See you on the next video.